Recording, and I'm going to mute you all. So, all right. So hopefully Donovan will find his way in. Everybody else who needs to will find their way in. So what I want to talk to you today is about distance. Hopefully you all, if you weren't there for the talk I did on the tactical wheel and tactical tree, then you managed to watch it. You managed to watch it on YouTube because I taped it like I'm taping this one. What I want to talk about today, and this is actually I'm not the first person in Hemaland to talk about this, but I am the guy who translated the book, is distance coming from Delahunt and other people, et al.'s Le Spirit de l'Épée, the spirit of épée, the spirit of the sword, literally, but of course we're talking about fencing épée. And TQ did this, I believe. Brian, it was T, right? Who did the distances class and the distance concepts at IGX a couple years ago, I think.
Yeah, it was a year ago.
Yeah, it was a year ago. Well, everything seems so long ago right now. But T introduces. It's like, oh, cool! I love that book. But I'm not going to be clean the only person talking about this. What I do have, however, is a PDF of the book, which I use to translate it. So I can do this instead of doing this with reference to doing physically. I can actually show you the diagrams in the book. So let me share my screen, and then I'll tell you what what this is all about. So share screen, and there we go. Adobe Reader and share. There we go. All right. So what we have here is a diagram of two fencers. And ignore for a moment that they're holding épées, right? They can be holding whatever you like them to hold in your imagination. They can be holding longswords. They can be holding rapiers. They can be holding axes. They can be holding pool noodles. They can be holding spaghetti. I don't care. They have any handheld weapon. And the idea behind this is that there is a limit of danger, right? That there's a safe zone, right? And then and fencer A here is out of distance, right? They're in the distance. This is the distance that fencer B can theoretically strike. This will of course be highly variable depending on the individual. To give you an example, right? I have a longer striking distance than Liam does, right? Or Brian does. Other people, right? John O'Mara from Worcester, not Worcester Fencing Club, but WSTR. He's a very tall guy, right? He's got more of a striking distance than I do. So this is pretty obvious, right? This is a pretty obvious concept that we've got a distance of security. Note also that you can have a simultaneously in two different distances. So like your punch distance and your kick distance might be different, right? But this comes into unarmed darts as well. All right, so we've got our safe distance. And then, of course, you enter into the danger of distance, right? Because of the movement of one or both fencers. This is a very, very important concept, that it's not always you advancing to the other person, but the other person can advance to you. Oh, I wanted to remember one more thing. I was going to say about relative striking distance. In HEMA, right, in sport fencing, we're talking here about the lunge distance. And it could be the lunge distance to one person's advanced target, which is the hand or the leg, or the slightly long distance to the body. But also in HEMA, your distance may be limited by the system that you're using. So George Silver attacks at a shorter distance. He wants to be in the time of the hand. These guys, we're imagining they're at the time of the hand of the foot, right? That they're going to extend their arms and then also move their feet because they've got épées. Generally, when I talk about distance, I'm talking about the time of the hand and the foot. If we're doing like silver systems, say you're Bill, then you're talking about the distance of the hand, which tends to negate Bill's longer reach because he's going to the distance where he can just reach out and touch you with the sword. That's an important thing. All right, moving along, let's go to the next one, right? So then here's the attacking distance, right? So we got to move into the distance of attack. And where fencing occurs is around this, right? That the important thing here is that one or both fencers can enter into that, and that's where a lot of the footwork is, and disguising your preparations and entering that distance at just the right moment to either prepare the attack or to prepare a defense. Because this is the important thing too, is that we're thinking here about attacking, right? That oftentimes we're thinking, how do I attack? How do I hit? And that's where our brains get paralyzed, is because we're thinking, how do I attack? How do I hit? But that's not your only option, because the other guy can also enter into distance, giving you the opportunity to attack. You understand? So these are some important things that arise. And of course, if somebody is much larger than somebody else, there's going to be a mismatch. Here, fencer B is much bigger than fencer A. And so fencer A can be attacked well before they are within striking distance. These are, of course, gender neutral mannequins here. But the authors use the masculine because they're French, but we'll just neuter them. So fencer B here, much bigger guy, right? Can hit. So A may need to change their tactics because of their relative distance and their relative distance of being able to make an effective attack vis-a-vis fencer B. If fencer A wades in there, fencer B is going to pick them off before they get in distance. And fencer B, if they're at all smart, is going to use their footwork to maintain that distance. So this is a very, very important thing. So you may need, and this can also take into account not just the relative size of the fencers, but relative flexibility, right? A younger person could lunge much further than an older person by virtue of their tendons not having ossified yet, like mine are in the process of doing. You can also different sorts of weapons, different lengths of weapons, all sorts of different things can take this into account. So there's this distance of action. So you may want to choose a different tactic. That is a counter time action, a counterattack action, a counter time action, whatever you like, based on your relative distance vis-a-vis the opponent, right? This, of course, this is the orient, decide kind of tree here, right? That you take into information, make a decision, you do the action. This has to be automated, of course. But they actually cut out part of this, right? Because they with experience and with proper management distance, you cut that out. Okay. So we have here, let's go on down, what they call game profiles. I'll translate this as elementary game profiles is the best way to translate this. What game are you going to play against somebody else? And this brings into account all of the management of distance stuff that I previously talked about, which is awareness of distance and awareness of your relative distance of attack vis-a-vis the adversaries, and awareness of what your best tactic might be, or what tactic you want to try vis-a-vis what they're doing. It's very hard, for instance, to try to respond to somebody who has much greater reach than you, and simply counterattack them, especially to the deep targets, to the head or the body, if they're simply making attacks at their most extreme distance, right? That's not a good idea. So what happens is, here's the schematic, is that gives rise to these four, what they call profiles, these four sorts of fencing tactics, which are not just technique, right? And not just tactics in the sense that I talked about in the last time, but also take into account not just what sorts of techniques you're doing, right? Not just the mechanics, but also the management of distance, and therefore the management of time and the initiative to either attack or respond to attack that comes into play there. And they give four basic profiles on these axes of the decision to attack and the decision to enter into distance. So they are, to wit, the conqueror profile. So the conqueror enters into distance in order to attack, right? And this takes into account, your basic Hema newbie. It takes into account also a lot of really good advanced people, because they may disguise their intent they may move around. They may, they will not just simply wade in and hit, because of course if somebody does that and they're new and they're obvious, it's fairly easy to counter. But a good conqueror, an advanced conqueror, is going to disguise their intentions, and they're going to enter into distance when you least expect it, and they're going to hit you, or try to. Diametrically opposed to them is the blinder. The blinder neither enters into distance nor makes the decision to attack. The blinder rather will wait for somebody else to enter into distance in order to attack, and then they're going to counter that attempt to attack. They're going to parry riposte it. They're going to counterattack it. They're going to get away, go. This doesn't mean that the blinder only gives ground, and that the blinder is only going to just retreat. No. Maybe they're going to play at the distance. Maybe they're going to make the conqueror, maybe they're going to make the attacker think that they can enter into distance and hit. But their strategy is going to be based on drawing that attack and somehow frustrating or countering that attack. Then we have the person who enters into distance but does not attack. And we'll call this person the presser, because you're pressing in on the opponent, and you're forcing them into some sort of action. Of course, they do nothing. You should probably hit them, right? But this is where you're squeezing them. You're putting that pressure on, and then you get them. This is something that you see very common in the rapier treatises. In fact, you make Stringzeri enter distance, and you do that. You make them feel so uncomfortable that they attack, then you counter their attempt to attack. Okay? Finally, we've got the person who gives ground but then attacks. And this is a very good complementary strategy to the blinder, because instead of just giving ground, and then countering whatever they do, you give ground, but maybe on their advance into distance, their attempt to do something, you hit them, right? So here, you give ground, right? You let them make the enter, and then you hit. This is something else. This is the classic attack on preparation, something that happens very often in rapier treatises. None of these are really explicitly discussed, of course, in any of the longsword treatises, right? They don't really talk about any of this. This is all stuff that comes through practice, right? Meyer says the marketplace will teach you, but this is stuff that emerges from fencing, okay? Now, if you remember in Worcester, maybe it was last year, we actually did quite a bit. We did quite a few classes on playing with these profiles after IGX. But this is something that's good to realize and good to know, okay? These tactics, if anyone really talks about these tactics, is really George Silver, right? George Silver really has strong blinder counter tendencies. He doesn't really talk a lot about initiating attacks. The Germans, when they say to be in the vor, right, to take the vor, that can have a variety of interpretations. A lot of people, especially early on, they interpret it as, oh, you need to have a conqueror mentality. But if you think about it, if they come in, right, you can always act and take the vor, if you like, as a counter or as a blinder, right? That nothing really that's in any of the treatises explicitly counters any of these ideas. But these are sort of 4 fundamental strategies that you can use. So if you're fencing with someone, right, think, what am I doing, right? Who is entering? The questions you have to ask yourself: who is entering distance? Am I entering distance, or are they entering distance? I keep getting hit. Is it because I'm entering distance? Maybe I should make them enter distance. Am I initiating the attack, or are they initiating the attack? If what you're doing on these axes of entering distance and initiating the attack is not working, change it up. And this, you don't need to know a lot of techniques. You don't need to know 10,000 cuts and 10,000 ways to move the sword in order to enact these. You can do these with the most simple techniques. Because this is not technique, right? This is tactics, right? This is application. Okay? So they go on to say that everyone has got a principal profile. And they're very French in this, and they're very psychological. They say it's an inclination of your personality, right? It's an inclination of the fencer's personality. And this is true. Some people are going to be more impetuous and some people aren't. But one of the great things about fencing, and I'll wax a little bit philosophical here if you don't mind, is that it does teach us self-control, and it can teach us to try on different personae as we fence, right? Maybe somebody who's, less impetuous, somebody who's got more patience. And everyone is going to really have a primary profile, but you're gonna find that you have a secondary profile that you fall into a good rhythm with, and it's going to change also as you age, right? I used to be very conqueror in my personality, and now I'm very much more of a counter and blinder. So that's the thing. Someone's calling me from Chicopee for some reason. I don't know. And they give this here, right? That you can evolve along these axes as you develop as a fencer. So that's a pretty good one. So for instance, they're saying here that a conqueror can develop into a oppressor or a counter, right? But probably not going to be a blinder, right? That's diametrically opposed. If you can pull that off, that's great. A counter can be oppressor, it can go to oppressor or blinder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these are really, you can develop these profiles, and you can also pretend to be one thing and then do another one, right? They keep going on and on and on in great detail in such a way that was really annoying to translate this book, because they kept saying the same damn thing over and over and just repeating, just saying, oh, then the blinder, it says the same thing for everyone, right? They just had to do it exhaustively because they're French. And they give also some exercises like bouting analysis and stuff like that. So I'm going to turn off the screen sharing because I said about as much as I want to about that. And we could talk more, and we could discuss this for a little bit, for like 10 minutes or so. But then Libby has got to, is doing a conference call. Hi, Libby. Oh, and some people said stuff in chat. This profile fits my style. So yeah, discuss it. Good to see you all, by the way.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Hi.
Oh, you're in your work clothes.
Yeah, I'm at work currently. So I was hoping to be able to listen in while working. So far, it's working.
Cool. Well, I'll put the video up too, so there'll be more to it. So,
do you have access to all that information in English though?
Yeah, I translated it. I don't even
Yeah, Donovan.
Oh yeah. Speaking of Steve, this I finally approved this. This is more attractive. Yes. That should be being published. Being delivered to publish, but it'll be put out soon, I hope. So, yeah. So, what style do you think that you are, right, as a fencer?
I like to attack on their preparation to attack. So a lot of people have the tells of like tensing up a little bit or pulling their sword back slightly before going forward. I like to interrupt their train of thought. That's personally where I like to fence.
Yeah. And if you can observe that, right, that's like a really good thing, right? That if you observe the other person's psychological state, because that's a cue too, right? To do that. Cool. So,
Listening to that felt a lot like the 4 temperaments.
Yeah.
Caloric, phlegmatic. I think I'd go for the conqueror, just because I don't feel confident doing anything else.
Just because you don't feel. Well, that's just the thing, is that people in the beginning, they do tend to be, right? So what would that be? That would be like choleric, right? We could, it is very much for temperamenty in a lot of ways. Choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic and melancholic, right?
Yeah.
I guess because I'm a strongly melancholic with a side dose of choleric, then maybe, I always want to be a conqueror, but it doesn't work well for me. But I would think that the blinder is kind of the melancholic. Pietro Monti talks actually a great, if you want to look for precedents in this, Pietro Monti in the 15th century talks in great detail about the diagnosis, the diagnosis of men and people's different temperaments. But there's weaknesses to that too, right? It's not good to always be the conqueror. So with maturity, and mind you, your temperament changes as you get older. As you get older, things tend to be a little more. That's your alarm. Okay. Okay. So, what about? What do you guys think would work for you? What do you think you tend to do currently, and what do you think would work better for you if you think about it?
Well, of course, I keep trying to be less impetuous.
Yeah.
Because that's what, among other things, Silver wants me to do. But my background as a bouncer in a nightclub tends to lead me to want to finish it. And I get in a hurry. And a lot of times I should move out of distance and reset, and I don't. It was my impression of me.
Yeah. Well, Silver, I was saying before, is very much a blinder or conqueror sort of guy. But he also limits his distance because he wants you to step in before you attack. That he's strongly in favor of gaining the place before attacking. So.
Right. Well, of course, the thing is, his system is described mainly from the point of view of the patient. That is to see the person who does not enter distance, but you can pull it inside out, like you can turn a sock inside out and view it from, the inside, and view it from the point of view of the agent, because the advantages for the patient are the problems for the agent, and the advantages for the agent are the problems for the patient.
Yeah, exactly.
He takes it from one end for purposes, I think, more of illustration than saying you never do this, you always do that.
Yeah, I'm taking the call upstairs because Libby's got to start her. Oh, you got the wrong link. Libby's got to start a call. So we're going up from my downstairs with the swords to my upstairs with the swords. Actually have my desk here, which I never use. So
one thing I think is interesting with me is that depending on the weapon, I fence a different one of those four. I feel like
That's pretty interesting.
I think with Epee and Blinder. What's that?
Why do you think you changed profile?
I don't know. I think honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with confidence.
So the experience.
Like I'm more comfortable with Longsword than I am with Epee.
I think it's
so. Yeah. With your confidence level going up, what does it transform into? Which profile do you lead with more confidence?
Conqueror.
Conqueror?
But that's also
Longsword?
Not great to do all the time. Because I'm definitely moved adjacent, either up or over, depending on who I'm fencing as well.
Which is smart.
What's kind of funny, when I do Epee, I'm like the opposite.
Certain weapons also don't have much of defensive potential, like the broadsword.
Exactly.
Got a big defensive potential. Rapier's got a very counterattack potential, but longsword has got a lot of attack potential.
Yeah.
So it does change that. Are you on the track?
What's that?
Do a lot of people find they change their style based off of their opponent? Like if their opponent is a little more passive, do they find themselves being like, okay, I will now fill that role of conqueror?
Yep.
Like how often do you really feel yourself changing that way? It's getting really
with the person?
You kind of have to. One point that Delahome and the others make is that you really do need to change your change your profile depending on who you're fencing and what their tendencies are. And if something's not working against them, right, and that certain tactics work better against other tactics.
Yeah, it's also like if I'm fencing someone, they change up their tactics. I need to, like what you're just saying. So if someone starts being more of a conqueror towards me, I got to like move in a different direction. Otherwise, we're just gonna be slamming into each other.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about some of the exercises we did a couple of weeks ago. And it seems to suggest that you even may sometimes want to transfer from one to another almost instantaneous. Now, I might be moving as a conqueror, but that blade's coming at me. Now it's going to be more like a presser.
Yeah.
Or likewise, I could start out maybe as a counterer, but maybe I'll let him finish his technique. I'll absorb it, then come back, depending on what actually happened, how they react, whether they hesitate or not.
And it's good to be able to do that, right? To recognize opportunities. Really, yeah. And that's another thing that they say, right? Is to be able to respond spontaneously at the right time. Which, I mean, the only way to do this is really to do it. It's hard to do. So anyway, so now that I have you all here, which is good. Quick announcement. I'm gonna stop recording. So I'm gonna stop recording, but I'll do some quick announcements and stuff for planning and whatever. Okay. And unless first thing I should say is, anyone have any other points or?
Yeah, I have a question. Is how many profiles do you suggest focusing on being proficient at? Would you recommend just doing them all, or would you say focus on one and then two, and then once you're good at that profile, add a third one in?
Yeah, basically that, right? What they suggest is basically you're gonna have a good initial profile, and you definitely would have confidence in a second one and recognize that you can turn to that and feel good about that in the pinch if the first one isn't working. But then you can develop a third, right? You're rarely, if you're a strong attacker, you're rarely, if ever, going to be someone who's good at least very successful at being passive, right? Another thing, just pivoting off what Mike said before, is you can also feign a different profile than you do, right? You could come forward very aggressively, but then give ground and hit them. That sometimes it's good to pretend to be doing something you're not, or to simply rotate between them to keep the person off balance in a longer sort of bout. So, okay. So, yeah. Any other points or other? Cool. All right, I'm going to stop recording. This is about half an hour, and Libby's on her call downstairs, so I'm going to stop recording.